And so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm here in San Francisco. I'm Bahia Yasmin Robinson. I will give you a little bit more of an intro in just a few minutes. But again, happy Earth Day. Thank you so much for joining us at the Black Voices and Sustainability third series discussion. And this one is focused on the ecosystem of founders, Black founders in the space that are incredible entrepreneurs and have such a rich history and legacy and are building incredible businesses in the sustainability space and supporting both founders and for us fund managers in the sustainability and climate space. And I want to introduce my partner, Taj.
Hello, everyone. I'm Taj Eldridge. Many of you may know me as a senior director from Lacey. As of May 25th, I'm departing from our role, and Bahia and I are joined forces to launch Include Venture Partners, which is a new initiative, a new fund focusing on diverse fund managers, as well as founders in this space. So I'm very happy to be here again for our part 3. Look forward to the lively conversation as always. And now we have some of my favorite founders that are here. So I'm really happy and can't wait for you guys to hear from them as well. Bahia?
Thank you, Taj. Thank you. We're very excited. So Taj, along with our other partner, Mr. Keith Spears, makes up the Include Ventures team. And this is really part of a larger franchise that started with the platform that I launched in 2018 called VC Include, which was the first platform to aggregate women-led and diverse-led fund managers in the impact and venture capital alternative space. And so it's grown quite a bit, grown very fast, very excited to be a leader in the space and to be really aggregating best-in-class fund managers and also the absolute brightest stars on the founder side, both on the impact, climate, and sustainability space and venture capital. And so we see all of these kind of industries and there's an overlap, right? So clean tech, sustainability, climate is not just its own standalone industry, right? That intersects with everything that how we live, how we work, how we thrive. And so part of our mission is to integrate ESG, sustainability, climate into portfolio companies, into fund strategies across the board. And so with that, you'll continue to see a lot of programs, whether it's supporting emerging managers through our fellowship for first-time funds that happen to be Black, Latinx, and best-in-class first-time funds to build institutional funds, or whether it's investing in founders as co-investments. We're really creating an ecosystem of excellence and of best-in-class founders and fund managers. And so really excited to have this third series. We started as a background, this particular Black Voices and Sustainability series after the George Floyd. I mean, just because there were no Black voices, we felt that we're really speaking up in the sustainability space. And after George Floyd, and the kind of onslaught of folks asking not just what to do, but where are they? Where are their best-in-class founders and fund managers to invest in? We decided to launch this with the generous support of the Hewlett Foundation. So thank you to them on the call as well. And the other thing I'll say before I hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves is that we're really excited to launch a new initiative, a new program focused on diverse emerging managers that have climate funds. And we're being a little bit broader than venture. We're looking at public and private markets, both in US and Europe. So stay tuned for more information about that. We're very excited to really be, talking the talk, talking with you, walking the walk, et cetera. And so with that, very excited on Earth Day to present fantastic founders and ecosystem builders on this call. Ms. SaLisa Berrien, Mr. Kerry Bowie, and Ms. Julia Collins. So SaLisa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Bahia. Yes, so my name is SaLisa Berrien. I'm the founder and CEO of COI Energy. We are a digital energy management platform that detects and eliminates energy waste in buildings in order to repurpose that waste for good. And that good is to optimize electric grid, clean up our environment, and also to provide equitable access to clean energy solutions to marginalized communities. Thank you. Glad to be here. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day, Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia Collins, founder of Planet Forward. We're on a mission to help tackle climate change by making it easier to bring climate-friendly products to market. We build software that helps brands decarbonize their supply chains, get on a path to net zero emissions, and improve the overall sustainability of their products. And as a proof point for what it takes to build a truly climate-friendly and carbon-neutral brand, we actually launched Moonshot with a line of climate-friendly crackers late last year. So I encourage you to all go check out moonshotsnacks.com to see what climate-friendly eating is all about.
Amazing. Yes, please put that in the link, and everyone put your companies in the link, please, so that everyone can follow you and as consumers support you and hopefully invest in you as retail investors, which we'll get into. Kerry, last but not least, brother, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I wear a number of hats, but I'll speak of a couple of them. I am the founder and president and executive director of two nonprofits. One, the Majura Project, which is a sort of post accelerator to help startups led by founders of color and women. It's industry agnostic, but we have a number of companies in the clean tech and environmental space. And I recently launched a nonprofit called Browning the Green Space, which is here in the Northeast, but really targeted at cross-sector leaders, really striving to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in clean energy and beyond. So we were looking across a number of different areas, from careers, companies, capital, contracts, and communities, to really take advantage and try to tackle these dual problems of climate change and the racial wealth gap.
Awesome. And you are, I didn't ask you guys where you're based to share with everyone.
I am right outside of Boston in Somerville.
I'm in New York City.
I'm in the unceded territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, which we also call San Francisco.
Okay, I was like, where are we going to this?
Love it.
Love it.
Love it. To Julia's point in the chat, my good friend Leon put a link there. If you also want to know what land you're on, if you're in the United States, what native land you're on, go in the chat. It's a link there so that you too can be educated like Julia.
I love it. I love it. I need it.
So why don't we get into the first question? And I'll start. So for me, as I mentioned, I was formerly at a few accelerators, both at the University of California and at Lacey. And what I've noticed is that sometimes capital is not the only thing founders need, right? That's the whole point of an accelerator, to provide these other sources. So for each of you, both Julia and SaLisa as founders, Kerry as an ecosystem builder, outside of capital, what are other ways that the investment community, the sustainability investment community can assist founders of color, Black founders in this space outside of capital? What are your thoughts there? Anyone can jump in, please.
Yeah, I will start off with just because this is our 5th year, and just super excited to say that we've made it 5 years and striving and thriving to go on for more. But what I recognized over the last 5 years, what's really important is like building up that network and ecosystem around you. So having corporate partners that will sign up and show that, hey, we're doing this work with you. We fortunately had that in the beginning with a large utility that signed on with us. And then now looking at enterprise customers. So our investors could also help with like those introductions to the different corporate partners and also strategic partners.
I really like what you're saying, SaLisa, and just to build on that and sort of contextualize it around the work that I'm doing at Planet Forward, investing is incredibly important, like putting more dollars into the hands of diverse founders, particularly the founders who are tackling some of the largest social and environmental issues in the world. That's just a good idea. But when you think about a founder's journey, there are different inflection points. And one of the most critical is going from seed to Series A. This is where we lose 90% of the amazing founders that have made it to the seed stage. And one of the most important things that can happen for a founder in going from seed to Series A is having a large corporate client, customer, paying customer. And so, just to build on SaLisa's point, if investors have bases of LPs that are deeply connected to these corporations, then beginning to socialize this idea that part of a corporation's environmental and social good should be related to investing in early stage technology, particularly that's led by diverse teams. And that might mean de-risking the proposition a little bit. It might mean by co-investing. Typically, we think about strategic investors as coming on post Series A, but there may be ways through a contract to de-risk the proposition of a brand taking on a large customer. There may be ways to think about shortening payment terms. So small brands who are, capital constrained can get paid on net 30 instead of net 120. But really thinking about how to make the proposition of working with a large corporate sponsor a little bit risky for the startup.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what SaLisa and Julia just said. The Majura project, Majura Swahili for summer. And so our theory of change is really linked to the growing season. So the same way a seed or a seedling needs, sunlight, water, nutrients, a place, we think that startups and small businesses need the same similar things. And so we have 4 C's. And so capital is the last one. The first 3 are consulting, coaching, and connections. And so consulting, we partner with the Boston Consulting Group and others to really look at like strategy, sales and marketing, operations. How do we just move the needle or move the lever for these companies? Then we add business coaches and leadership coaches to really help, really the organizations, but also the entrepreneurs. Because I really think it's more about the jockey oftentimes than the horse. And so how can we make sure that we're feeding into them and helping them do what they do? And then to, really go into what SaLisa and Julia said, a lot of it is connections. How are we connecting to whether that's investors or just people with, that right technical knowledge, or is it to partners? Because the best way to make money is through customers. And so if you can partner with a big corporate, you don't have to take investment dollars, but you can just rely on revenue from customers. That's the best way. So can we broker some of those relationships? And so that's how we think about it.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask, and that's perfect segue into our next question about corporations. So you touched a little bit on there's a, again, ecosystem builder, it's for a reason, right? We need these different components. We need the technical knowledge. We need that corporate, not just partnership, right? But sponsorship and digging in. So how do we, this is something that we've talked individually and that our team talks about in terms of inspiring corporations to do more. How do we evolve or involve corporations to really understand what the value proposition is and to make bets on new sustainable technologies? What do you think it takes, or what are your ideas there that maybe some folks on the webinar might be in a position to move forward?
And let me add, there are some concrete examples out there that we need to look at, like Target's $2 billion commitment to Black-owned businesses in their stores. And so there's several opportunities out there, but we'd love to hear from the founders specifically on that Tapia's question.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who works at the intersection of food and technology and has a deep network and community within the CPG food space, I will tell you that the Target announcement has sent the most incredible waves of energy among the founder community that I'm a part of. So announcements like that are game changing. Let's think about Goldman Sachs' $1 billion commitment, led by our sister, Margaret Anadou, right? That's $1 million that's going to be going into the hands of people who are building solutions to uplift Black women. So I do think that when we can identify, movers in this space, corporations who are visionary and can take the first step, empowering them to make those commitments, amplifying those commitments, and then creating circles of accountability around them is really important. I do think we need to figure out a way to be collecting receipts at the 1-year mark, at the 2-year mark, at the 5-year mark, at the decade mark, after we see these big commitments being made.
Absolutely. SaLisa? And
Yeah, yeah. So just in the last, I'd say 6 months or so, I've been spending a lot of time with corporates and some of the really, large enterprise customers. And the feedback that I've been receiving is, hey, what could, like if I come on your platform, I think I'll break it. And I'm like, no, you won't. I'm like, I didn't ask you to come on the first year that we started. I'm asking you now that I know that we're prepared and we have that kind of foundation. And so one of the enterprise companies that's really doing a lot in the sustainability space, and they're walking the walk and talking the talk, I believe, is Microsoft. And Microsoft has, reached out to us and talked about like, what is it that we can do to support your company? And so we're in those conversations, just talking about like, how would a relationship look like, and how could we proceed with them kind of amplifying versus, having another enterprise company say, oh, I think we're too early for you because we'll break your platform. So having those kind of conversations where the partner is actually looking at how do we get to a solution where we can really support you in a real way and help you with that inflection point into your acceleration.
Absolutely. And to SaLisa's point and Julia's point, my eyes and my suggestions there is not just to the CPG companies like Target, but it's also to utilities. LADWP has been doing a great job in that space. Edison has been doing a great job, but that's just here in California. There are 50 states of this nation, and each of those states have utility companies. Even in my home state of Texas, what happened there with the grid, there's an opportunity for those entities to look at these black founders like SaLisa, like Julie, and others to really kind of push things forward. Kerry, what are your thoughts there on coming from the Northeast?
And before we get to Kerry, I just want to remind everyone and to please put questions in the Q&A. Chat's good, but sometimes we might miss it. But if you put in the Q&A, we'll be sure to try to address all of your questions. So I just want to make sure, because there's a lot of things flying pretty quickly. So Kerry, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, definitely following up on what Taj said, and actually following up on what SaLisa said before that, or maybe it was you, but yeah, one of these things is, and for me, it's not even like placing bets. Like some of these things, it's, we are the solution. We are the definite solution as we see things, especially in brown and the green space. What we recognize is a lot of what we're doing as a convening organization, we're identifying and filling gaps. And then we're trying to build bridges. And so if you think about what Taj talked about, the investor-owned utilities, and thinking about getting technology to communities of color. Well, if you don't have any suppliers or vendors that are people of color, and you're going out into our neighborhoods, I mean, it's just better if you have Black or Latinx folk doing that. And so that's not making a bet. That's just what my grandmother would call good old horse sense or common sense, and they're not doing it. And so we are doing some of that, Taj, here in the Northeast. We're having conversations with our investor-owned utilities. We're talking to the national grids and the Eversources and the First Light Powers, those folk, because they have an opportunity. And quiet as it's kept, they're typically, in a sense, they're not quasis, they're utilities. They're getting paid by us, by the ratepayers. And so they should have a higher bar to meet in terms of how they're doing this work. And so that's just, to me, that's low hanging fruit that we're tapping. And you're right, Taj, in the, is it Exelon and Duke, down in the Mid-Atlantic? Is it Southern Company, down in the South? It's, we can do this all around the country, and we should be having these conversations.
And if I could just add on there, since I signed 3 investor-owned utilities already with my company, I also would say that with investor-owned utilities, when they're looking at signing agreements with BIPOC founders, that it's not only like, okay, we're trying to like check, a mark that we have, like a goal we have, but make it real. So, we're here in business to really do business, not to just have an agreement and then nothing moves forward. So I say that to say, because there might be some investor-owned utilities and like, oh yeah, we'll give them a contract, but then there's no real work happening. And that's not what we're interested in. We have a solution because we really truly believe it's going to make a difference and it's changing the world. And then right now we have a track record showing that that's the case, being in business. Like for me, 5 years, Julia has had several years. This is, I think it's your second or third startup. And so like we have the track record to say, this is what success looks like. And we are able to help you make an impact within your own organization and help you innovate. For utilities, innovation is big and they typically don't have it inside. So utilizing startups like us to help them innovate will be great.
Absolutely. And I'm personally staring at the AABE, the American Association of Blacks in Energy. I'm looking at you, Latinos in energy, and I'm looking at you, Asians in energy. We need you to also be advocates for these founders internally, because most of you work at these utilities and most of you see that. So definitely, I think utilizing that would be part of the whole goal. The next question I want to get into is we talked about corporations, we talked about things like accelerators and incubators and other facets and how they assist. Let's turn our hats and our heads to our government and policy. Amy Klobuchar has been leading the forefront of focusing on new policies that's going to come out and help small businesses, which will include founders in our spaces. There's new infrastructure bills that are coming down the pipeline that's going to help. There are local bills here in Los Angeles on the transportation side that's really impacting our transportation companies. But for the three of you, what are some other ways, or what are some specific ways that our lawmakers and our policymakers can assist Blacks in sustainability?
Yeah. When we think about the investment community, we often think of particularly venture capitalists as capitalists first and foremost, like people who are very smart at deploying capital against business strategy or deploying capital against changes that they're seeing in the macroeconomic environment to make money. But I think probably the most exciting moments happen in human history when you see really smart capitalists working alongside really smart policymakers. And when those two conditions can exist in the same place at the same time, that's how we can really move the needle forward. I am very deeply concerned about the condition of our food systems, right? Planet Forward is all about reimagining food systems so that we can get to real zero, not just net zero. And so in terms of the policy that I'm really excited about right now, I'm looking at, Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren's Farm Systems Reform Act. That's, a new piece of legislation that's being introduced that's going to be game changing for the way that we manage our farm systems. I'm looking at the Justice for Black Farmers Act as another piece of legislation to support. So if I could just advocate for those two pieces of legislation for the folks in the audience who are deeply connected to the non-market component of this overall conversation.
And I think maybe kind of continuing down well, it's not necessarily non-market, but on the consumer side, right? So we've talked about corporations, we've talked about, policy, and all of these things absolutely need to be linked in terms of the value chain so that we're able to, drive this again, net zero. And one of our supporters, I said net zero, I think I said 2030 or 2040, like 2050. I was like, it's not 2050. I was like, we can't wait that long, right? So we need to, and if we're going to accelerate this process to get to net zero, it has to be a much shorter timeline. What can consumers do? I think, we've talked a lot about, brands and corporates and policymakers, but, what about, either retail investors or even just consumers? And how do you think we can, also put some pressure on the systems and business, big and small business, to kind of move the needle?
So when we look at, like, first of all, today being Earth Day, and if we just look at around the world, how much we waste. I mean, waste is a big part of, our problem right now with the whole climate crisis. And if we just look at US alone, in 2017, we wasted $55 billion on energy. That was not use, that was waste. And so that equated to over 300 million metric tons of carbon being emitted into the environment. If everyone looks at how they're utilizing energy and they're incentivized to be more efficient, I think that in itself would start driving this more efficient ecosystem on all sides, from the utility side, because if I operate my buildings more efficiently, and then I can make money off of any kind of flexibility or excess I have, it's going to motivate me to do something different. And as a consumer, if I'm like, oh, right now I can adjust today for Earth Day, my employees at 2 o'clock, everyone's unplugging. So they're going to still work. And if it was nighttime, they would be like, you know, operating like people in other countries that don't have electricity, but actually seeing like what it's like to not have access to energy. And then how we take that to the next level when we focused on like clean energy solutions. So if we all become efficient, we use our flexibility, we give back to the grid, we give back to communities, we give back to the environment, like everything becomes more efficient and optimized. And so I think in starting with each one of us, we can do our part in saying, what do I have operating right now that I really don't need to have operating? And how could I make a difference?
Yeah, and just to add a few things, and I may go back a little bit, Taj. I started out in government. I worked for Governor Patrick, you know, second Black governor in the country, first in Massachusetts, and went into the Baker administration here in Massachusetts, and I was the director of environmental justice. And so I think there are a lot of policies and things around that. And I'll even go back corporate. You know, if you think of what Apple is doing with their accelerator, you know, former EPA administrator Lisa Jackson is there and her team. I know some of the folk over there, Besma and Marina and others, you know, they're looking at that supplier diversity thing. And I think that links to as consumers, like how are we making sure, and even as entrepreneurs, you know, how are SaLisa and Julia, you know, when they think about their vendors and their suppliers, how are you thinking about, you know, Black and brown folk and women when you do that? And so one thing I'll point out is, you know, there's the Justice 40 initiative. And so, you know, Bahia, as you're talking about the infrastructure bill and all these different things, how do we make sure that that money is getting to the right places? Because that's what we see time and time again. We see policies and things and money, and you turn around and you go, where'd that money go? Like, do we see it? Do we touch it? Do we get it? And so part of that initiative, hey, can we get 40% of that money to disadvantaged communities? And so those are the types of things that I think are really important as we move forward to make sure that we are in the mix. And that's the whole thing that Brown and the Green Space is trying to do, is say, hey, we want Black and brown people, you know, at the table as these things are going on.
Yeah. Just going back to the consumer part of the equation for a quick moment, you know, unfortunately, there's no silver bullet solution to the climate crisis in particular. There's no one single thing that we can do. But I truly believe that if you want to change the world, change food. You know, there are 9.7 billion people that are going to be living on the planet very shortly. We all actually have to eat every day. And 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions are attributable to land use and food systems. That's a really startling number. How do you even begin to address a number that's that large? Well, often it can start with just the individual choices that you make at home and for your family and for your community. I'm not advocating that everyone on this call immediately commit to living a vegan lifestyle, although the vegan lifestyle can reduce your food-related emissions by 73%. But guess what? A flexitarian lifestyle or a plant-forward lifestyle, one where you maybe pull back a little bit from beef and dairy and lamb, that can reduce your food-related emissions by 50%. So maybe the exercise for each of us is to think about what being a climatarian looks like. You know, someone who makes their food and lifestyle choices in accordance with the kind of world that they want to live in. And if you can do it for yourself successfully, make sure you tweet about it, gram about it, talk about it, blog about it, email about it, get your neighbors to do it, your families to do it, and then call up your retailer and say, you know, why aren't you carrying Moonshot? Why aren't you carrying my favorite plant-based granola? Because when consumers start to demand more for retailers, guess what? Retailers will follow suit.
That's a tweet. I'm waiting for somebody to
I
tweet.
was going to say, climatarian. I mean, You guys are dropping all kind of stats. I hope people are over recording this, so we'll be sharing it, but I hope also people are taking good notes, because these are a lot of jewels here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia. Well, let's turn before we get into the questions. One last question from our side, which is, outside of capital, are there other ways that, we engage investors, right? That's kind of what we do all day. What can the investment community and the sustainability, but the sustainable investment community, let's say, put it that way, how can they support you guys? I mean, there's some top line things, but give us a suite of options so that it's very, very crystal clear. And anyone can jump in at any point.
I think there are I think there are a number of different things as I think about this space. Well, first, you can, and I don't know if you said besides this, but definitely write checks to entrepreneurs. Our Black and brown and women founders are no riskier than others. I'll actually say that their distance traveled is longer, and I would say they're typically better than the majority population because they've done it all on much less. And so I think when you see people who are looking promising, invest in them, support them. And because of some of this, and Taj, this goes back to some of those policy things, I mean, the wealth gap is so crazy. Part of the reason I got into this work that I did in Boston was the Federal Reserve Bank back in 2014 came out with a report based on 2014 numbers. And in Boston, the average net worth of a white family was $247,500. It was $8 for a Black family. And so you can't, when you don't have that wealth, you can't sow into the people in your community. And so we've got to fix that. And so, are there some fellowships? Are there some things to do that? Can we do some pilots? I think there are a lot of things like that we can do. And the other piece, coming from a government background, I want to go back to policy. And this is just one example, but there are plenty of these examples. And I'll just use in the utility space too. I'll give two quick ones. And I know we need to get to the other Q&As. When you're going in and doing energy efficiency in houses in some of our communities, we've just got issues in terms of tenant owner issues. We've got issues in terms of like asbestos. We've got issues in terms of like old housing stock with old wiring. And so you can't even get to the work that you want to do because of these other things that are because of the lack or disinvestment in our communities for so long. And then let's say we want to get people doing that work. A lot of the utilities and things, the regs say, hey, you know what, if you ever use marijuana, I had a marijuana conviction, you can't do this work. And so we're just like, a lot of our folk are like completely just put out. And look, and we're not the only people smoking weed. But it just, that's back to the criminal justice system. How do we reform some of that? And kudos to, I'm from Alabama originally, Randall Woodfin. The mayor just announced, he's, removing 15,000, from like 1990 to 2020, just got rid of those. That's giving those people a second chance, especially when we see the cannabis industry is blowing up and lots of people are making a lot of money who don't look like us. And so we shouldn't, you're adding insult to injury when you keep us from jobs because of very minor offenses for stuff that is legal now.
Yeah, Kerry, good points. And let me add, before we're getting to SaLisa and Julia's point, I'm looking directly to my community, Bahia and our community of investors. When I first got into climate, when I looked around and say, working with climate-based funds, no one looked like me. No one looked like Julia. No one looked like Bahia, Kerry, or SaLisa. That's the first, I think, issue that we need to focus on is how do we get more people who look like us in the space as check writers to write these checks to the founders that look like these people here as well. To that point, that's why I'm proud that Bahia and I are launching an initiative later this year that will support 10 US-based climate fund managers that are Black and Latinx and women. And it's a focus to really kind of move that forward to ensure, because I think at the end of the day, we know that venture is about relationships, but if you all go to the same schools, you all go live in the same areas, your relationship is a smaller circle. If you come to places like Kerry in Alabama, me in Dallas and everywhere else, your circle is a little bit different. the circle will look a little bit different. And so that's one of the things I definitely want to employ to our investor community is hire more people of color in your space, not as scouts, not as consultants, but as partners who can write checks. But SaLisa and Julia, before we get into the Q&A, any other last minute thoughts on what other things can the investor community do to support you as founders in this space?
Taj, I like what you just said about the circle. I mean, because it's really important that we keep in mind that because of where we're from, I'm from Allentown, Pennsylvania. That's where I'm born and raised. And so our circles are different. So COI stands for Circle of Influence. And I truly believe that SaLisa didn't get to where she is because of herself. And our company didn't get to where we're at without having the organizations and the people to support us. And so circle of influence means a lot because that's how you propel organizations forward. That's how you keep people honest and all those things. And so when I think about, ways that you can support, when investors see like a model that looks different. So like just in the energy space, people are like, oh, that's such a crowded space, energy efficiency and demand management. Like, but, sliced bread was like, when it first came out, it was like, why do we want another type of sliced bread? Because it's made better, it tastes better, it might even look better. So us building this transactive marketplace where we're driving efficiency throughout the ecosystem. And then we have this KW for good. And I know when investors first heard that from us, they were like, oh, they're going to give back to these people in these marginalized communities. That's not what we want to invest in. We want to invest in, just how much, money they can make. And what they didn't recognize is that we're not taking away from the business model. We're still, going to have that revenue, those projections. A portion of the savings that the businesses receive coming on our platform go back to these communities. So our revenue doesn't change, but a lot of people get stuck at looking at the bigger picture. KW for good means a lot to me because I came from an energy impoverished or energy poverty family where we didn't have lights on. That's why Earth Day is important to me. That's why my team is taking time today to say from 2 to 3, we're shutting off everything and we'll operate with nothing on and just see what that's like. So if your computer dies, it dies because people like me didn't have that kind of power. So when I came up with this solution for COI Energy, I came up with it because I know from experience. So I worked in utilities for utilities in the smart grid space for 25 years. I know about the waste that's out there. I've worked with businesses and made recommendations how they can improve efficiency. And I think I'm kind of telling a whole story. I'm sorry. I like you, Taj, you just took me to another level.
Go.
This is what COI stands for. And this is why we're doing this. And we're making a difference and everyone's benefiting. So sorry.
No.
We get to one question. This is why it's a series that we're in this for life. So for us, This is just a continuation of what we talk about every day. And I think, people are here to learn. We're here to amplify, your, not just your voices, but also your experience, because if people don't know that you're here, that's why it's Black Voices in Sustainability, because people are like, they come to us and say, where are they? Like every day, And so this is part of our efforts to say, we are literally right here, and this is the energy and the expertise, that we have, that we can apply to new solutions to actually get to our goal of net zero, to get to planet forward, right? This is why we're here. So keep going.
Yeah, I love that Nika said in the chat, take your time, SaLisa. I just slacked my whole team. Let's turn the lights off for an hour. Like you're inspiring people with your words. Take your time,
Absolutely.
I'm so hyped up. I'm like, what can I add? So obviously we want to write checks, right? We want to hire people. I think also we want investors, and this is a hard thing. We want investors to track their own performance against their stated diversity goals.
Yes.
And I want them to publish that information, not as an exercise in blame or shame, no, but as an exercise in transparency and accountability. In the same way that we diligence to the nth degree any deal that we do, any investment that we make, any diverse funder that we back, we also, as investors, need to be diligencing ourselves and making sure that we are clear and transparent about where we stand right now, where we're going, and that we're tracking ourselves and holding ourselves accountable in a public way all along the way.
Diligencing yourself. That's another one. It's another tweetable moment. Diligence
And
yourself.
the one thing I would add, and this is sort of shameless in a sense, self promotion, but
No, do it.
I'm in the innovator support or entrepreneur support space, and I think we need to support the entrepreneurs, but you need to support the people who support the entrepreneurs, and there are a lot of people doing that. I actually am on the leadership team of a group called the Black Innovation Alliance. So my friends, Dr. Kelly Burden and Ania are leading that, and that's all across the country, because there are organizations all across the country, doing really good work. So how do we support them? I'm actually in an accelerator right now with Village Capital and that organization, and people like UBS and Travelers and the Sorensen Foundation are helping us to do what we do better. That's important. People like NECA, I see in the chat, NECA and Taj and Devin and Amy Dufour are doing with Green Tech Noir. That's great, because that's building community. I actually think I met Julia there before I actually met her elsewhere. I was like, oh, who is this person? What's going on, and doing that. And so it's a lot of it, like SaLisa said, is building community. And so there are the elementals and the queens over there, and there's Virtue Lab, and I know I'm going to leave somebody out. I don't want to get in trouble. I think of Greentown Labs is actually, I think right now is opening up the Houston. Juliana Garazar is probably maybe doing that right now as we're doing this. And so all of those types of organizations are important. So how can you support them? Whether with your time, your talent, or your treasure is really important too.
Amazing. We're going to try to hit a couple of these questions. And again, we'll be doing another series. So stay tuned for that in the next month or two. But let's go to Brooke's question about distribution and supply chain. So how distribution and supply chain has had to drastically change because of COVID. What are each of you doing to be on top of climate friendly changes in the supply chain? Great, timely question.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this one. What we do at Planet Forward is to help food companies understand the carbon impact at every node of their supply chain, and understand what interventions they can take in terms of their sourcing, their manufacturing, their distribution, their retailing, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But I think the first thing is quantifying greenhouse gas emissions across the supply chain, across the value chain, so that brands, companies can be very clear about where they stand and then get on a path to improvement. So we're really about measurement at Planet Forward.
Absolutely.
Lisa? Oh, go ahead, Kerry.
Yeah, no, I think we work with a number of different entrepreneurs, especially through our accelerator, and a number of them are looking at this space. And I didn't think of my friend Norma Kadena. She was at Mila, but she now just started Supply Change Capital in the food space, and actually thinking about some of that work from a logistics perspective. And so there are a lot of companies that are doing that, and we know that is really important, especially as you talk about vehicle miles traveled and just different ways of how do we electrify systems. Mobility is huge in this area, and access. So we're definitely looking at that, and that's really, really high priority for a number of our entrepreneurs.
And just because supply chain is one of the VC, I include fellows. I'm going to put their info. They're a fund that are investing in a number of founders in the supply chain and change space. So just to clarify that, I wish they could be on the call now, but I know they're traveling. But there's a link in the chat. SaLisa, do you want to?
No, I don't have anything to add. They did a
Okay.
fabulous job with that.
Yeah, but let me add though, Bahia, I think this is important. And number one, we want to thank you and Hewlett for doing this. We've had some great voices from the very beginning with Marilyn and Stefan from Full Cycle, and to Ethos Capital recently, and NECA, who I just shout out in the chat as one of those new minted VCs of color in the climate space. But I want people to understand that when we talk about sustainability and when we talk about energy, it is not foreign to people of color. I think if you grew up in the South, if you grew up in a house of a BIPOC household, things like shut off that light when you leave that room, things like you got to share that water when you take a bath, things like you can wear your brother's clothes when you get older. We've been
Yeah.
understanding the circular economy. We've been understanding sustainability before we even had a word. So I want founders and I want corporations and I want investors to understand that. And then as an Afro-Latino, I want you to understand the other part of that when we just talked about Nora Cadena. There are 43 people in this nation that speak Spanish. If you don't have a person of color that's in the Afro-Latino or Latino space, you're missing out on 43 million opportunities to make money. Because if this is about making money, if it's truly about making money, then you would go to the places where you can make money at. Those are the communities of color. One last thing I would tell you, BET did a special with Soledad O'Brien. Shout out Soledad. They talked about sustainability in BIPOC communities. And they started out with my hometown of Dallas. They talked about ways how greenlining impacted environmentalism in our communities. And it's going to take people like us, people like what Julia said, things like what SaLisa said to rectify this. When we think about sustainability, when we think about climate change, it's not just a let's save the planet, let's save the world. It is a public health issue. It is an economic justice issue. And it's a social change issue. So definitely I'm proud of the things we're doing here. And I just wanted to kind of put that out there as well for us.
And one thing I just got to add there, and I heard now Vice President Kamala Harris, when she was campaigning up here at one point, I think for Senator, talk about California and just going, this stuff is real. They got floods, they got fires, they got all this stuff. It's not about hugging trees. For her, it's about, that little girl, that little Black girl with asthma. And I've been on that, church call. I was on a church call a few weeks ago with someone talking about her granddaughter in intensive care for like a severe asthma. So to Taj's point, is really about public health. To me, it's not about trees and turtles and spotted owls. I love those things, but it's about people. And how are we making sure that our communities aren't getting all the environmental bads, the brownfields, the pollution, the asthma. Not only that, but also how are they taking advantage of these environmental goods? How are they getting the jobs? How are they getting the contracts? How are they getting works? How do we create jobs and create wealth in our community through this process?
I love that. And I want to tie that into one of the next questions that I think we have a couple of minutes to dig into, which is, and it's going a little bit back to the policy side, but how should founders talk to investors about policy risk? They're saying government support is important, but if a business depends on it, many investors run away. Think of price on carbon, SEC requirements of climate risk disclosure, et cetera. Anyone want to take that question about founders talking to investors about policy risk?
Yeah, so I could tell you when I first started, that was the question I got from everybody. It's like, what barriers do you have as it relates to policies? And, is it a showstopper if it's not approved by FERC or the Public Service Commission? And there is always a way. So when we started out, I thought that my first customer was going to come from the Northeast, just because it was deregulated markets. In fact, it came from the Southeast in Florida, and it was a regulated market. And they were able to utilize my platform for something that they already had approved from the Public Service Commission. They never had met with me. They had already approved what they can do, and my platform fit into that, so they didn't have to go for other approvals. So I say, when people bring that up, there's ways to implement new technologies and solutions that fit in this current political and regulatory realm. And so, if there's something new, like right now we're working on a transactive marketplace where we're enabling businesses to sell their excess capacity to another business. Now that's a little bit different. However, within a utility, you still can get that done without going to regulatory. You just have to do it within that utility. And then you can say, okay, right now you cannot physically give capacity to another building, but you can do it financially. And so there's ways around that. You got to think outside of the box when you're thinking about policies, and then you can still work on getting policies approved down the road. But there is a, a current way that you can actually work around that?
Yeah, I think this is such a great question. And, you know, what founders can do, I think, is to be open and transparent about risk. Uh, Investing is all about calculating, evaluating, and valuing risk, right? We talk about execution risk. We talk about market risk. Of course, we should also talk about policy risk. And I don't think it's a question of trying to make it seem as though there is no risk. Be open and transparent about it, and then have a productive conversation about how to accurately value the risk. Probably the most successful startups that we've seen ever are not the ones that had the least risky strategy. They're the ones that navigated that risk the most effectively.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add here is that that risk is in a sense par for the course. So that risk, white guy founders have that same risk. And so what I'm saying is it's no different than if you were investing in anyone else. And I would actually say that our founders of color and they're still like, salmon swimming upstream because we've got policy things in our way, and I'll just talk, here, my friends at Amplify Latinx and the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts and Greater Boston Latino Network recently filed a complaint against the city of Boston because, hey, they're not, hiring minority, vendors. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts is not much better, if that. We don't even have full transparency. And then if I think of even the federal government, and I'm not exactly sure on these numbers, or maybe me mixing them up, but I think last year it was like the Department of Defense, minority, spending was like 0.8%. Was what that made up. If you think we're like 30-40% of the population, like we're not even, if you quadruple that, we might get to 10% of what we should be. And so we've got other things that we're working on. Let's get rid of those. If the playing field is level, we're going to win. And also, when I say win, this is a win-win-win for everybody. This is not us. It's growing the pie. We're not taking anything off of anybody's plate. These are huge problems we're tackling. So I would think you would want everybody on the team as fully engaged as possible. So this works out for everybody if we can get us more engaged.
Yeah, it's getting to net zero, right? At the larger level. And we're part of that, right? We're part of this planet. So can't really ignore us.
But here, can I just add one thing that I need to say?
Yeah.
When we're thinking about like investors and how they can support, the other thing is like hiring, our teams. So for, every BIPOC founder, I mean, our teams, we have, they're probably the most diverse because we, recognize the importance of having our employees represent, our customers we're serving. And so we're looking for our investors to help us with, finding great talent and a diverse talent to bring on our teams, because it doesn't just stop with us. We have to move forward with our teams to make sure that we're staying on top of what our communities are asking for.
Absolutely. Well, one last question before we close out, and this continues, right? So again, this conversation continues, the series continues. We will continue to bring more Black voices and sustainability to the conversation and to you. Please share and tweet all of these amazing jewels and resources. That's going to be really important, what you can do on this call to amplify, and the folks that will that will see this recording as well. So there are tools out there that help one assess not just climate and carbon impacts, but also the related impacts on diverse communities. Where are those resources for Molly that was asking?
So what I'll add is, I think there are some, but not a lot. I think that's one of the things. There are a lot of things going on right now in that regard, as we, there's sort of an energy transition that's taking place in the country. The question is that going to be a just energy transition? I'm actually doing some consulting work with MIT's Roosevelt Project. They're looking at exactly that, sort of MIT and Harvard researchers looking at that work. I think when I talked about that Justice 40 initiative, That's part of that, is like, how are we tracking what's happening? Because oftentimes we have, good intentions, but there are unintended consequences that come if we really don't think about this stuff. One of the things I think that's really exciting about the Biden-Harris administration, one of my friends from here in the Northeast in Boston, Shalonda Baker, is now the deputy director of energy justice at DOE. And so she gets it, and I know she's going to be doing everything in her power to make this work with Secretary Granholm and others to really try to push this forward. But there are people looking, and not just in energy for the questioner. I think a lot of people, as we talk about impact metrics and people are trying to figure out DEI. Like, how do you really track it? How do you really, all the what is success? How do we really measure it? There are some people, some things that are doing. I know EPA had a tool, a tracking tool, like an EJ Stream tool, and there are other things out there, but I don't think they're enough, and I think people are working on them.
It's a lot of work to do. I know we have 2 minutes, Julia.
Yeah, as Kerry mentioned, there are some organizations that are creating environmental health disparities maps. I don't know if there's a national solution yet, but I think Washington's been working on this, and you're seeing states and municipalities beginning to map environmental health disparities. So I would search that. But again, there's so much more that needs to be done.
Amazing. Well, we have 1 minute, just enough time to close out. Thank you so much for such a fantastic conversation with leaders in the space, experts in the space. And we're so grateful for you to join us today. And thank you also for everyone that joined us live in this incredible chat. There's so much wealth of information just in this chat. I hope that you've looked up a lot of these resources, and we're really looking forward to our next number 4 in our series on Black Voices and Sustainability. Taj?
Absolutely. And again, I want to thank our founders, because without them, for us as investors, we wouldn't be able to invest. So, we need to, I think the relationship is great, and I'm glad Bahia and our partners at Hewlett that you allowed us to come to the audience and have these voices, so we can hear these voices in this space of sustainability.
Thank you. And we have a lot more partners. We have our climate fund project. We've got, our fellowships and really building this ecosystem of diverse and women-led and LGBTQI plus managers, including, not excluding, these dynamic founders and funders to build this more just and inclusive ecosystem. So we appreciate you all. Happy Earth Day. We will see you soon. Take care all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye for now.